Welcome to John's Tours. This is a tour of the Metropolitan Cathedral in Liverpool. Liverpool has two extraordinary beautiful cathedrals, the Anglican Cathedral and the Roman Catholic Cathedral. Our tour today is about the Roman Catholic Metropolitan Cathedral of Christ the King. England was a Roman Catholic country until Henry VIII decided to split with the Church of Rome because of his wish to marry Anne Boleyn. In the subsequent years, England became a Protestant country, and at the outset this was more of a political affair than a theological dispute. However, through various civil wars, ending in the Glorious Revolution in 1688, several laws were passed, including the penal laws, that sought to uphold the establishment of the Church of England against Protestant nonconformists and Catholicism, and they did this by imposing various forfeitures, civil penalties, and civil disabilities. Many of the penal laws were repealed, and in 1829, the Emancipation Act gave Catholics the right to vote. In 1850, there was the restoration of the Catholic hierarchy by Pope Pius IX. In the late 1840s, there had been a huge influx of Irish Catholics into Liverpool due to the disaster of the potato famine. In 1853, Edward Welby Pugin was commissioned to design a cathedral. Work started on the cathedral, and by 1856, the Lady Chapel had been completed, but the work stopped then due to a shortage of money and the desire to build more parish churches and schools for the people of Liverpool. Many expressed the need for a Roman Catholic cathedral, but the practicalities of looking after an enlarged congregation came first. In 1928, Archbishop Downey became the new Archbishop, and in 1929, at the 100-year anniversary of Catholic emancipation, Downey declared for a cathedral in our time, and a fund was raised for the building of a new cathedral. In 1930, £100,000 was spent on the purchase of the former Poor Law Institute at Branlaw Hill, and this is where we are today. Edward Luytens, creator of New Delhi, was commissioned to design a new cathedral, second only in size to St. Peter's in Rome. The internal height of this new cathedral would be 520 feet. The Anglican Cathedral is 331 foot high. The dome dimensions would be 168 foot wide, and it would be in the world's largest dome. Seating would be for 10,000, and the cost would be £300,000. This was going to be quite a response to the Anglican Cathedral in its own Gothic majesty. Work started in 1933, but by 1941 work had stopped due to World War II. And by the end of World War II, the estimated cost had risen to £27 million. Material and funding were now scarce. In 1953, the new Archbishop Godfrey commissioned another architect to produce a scaled-down version of the Luytens design. The architect was Adrian Gilbert Scott, brother of Giles Gilbert Scott, the architect of the Anglican. By 1958, the Luytens Crypt had been finished, but Archbishop Godfrey was appointed Archbishop of Westminster, and the new Archbishop, Archbishop Heenan, decided that the new build would take too long, and so he announced a new competition for a cathedral with certain stipulations. A maximum of 5 years to build, cost for a maximum of £1 million, and also to take into account the crypt. 300 architects submitted entries, and the winning design was by Frederick Gibberd, and so work started in 1962. Let's look at the outside of the cathedral. Looking up from Hope Street, we have a magnificent ceremonial flight of steps leading from the piazza to the bell tower, flanked by glass stels. The cathedral, built in concrete with a Portland stone cladding, rises high into the Liverpool skyline, supported by 16 boomerang-shaped concrete trusses. Flying buttresses are attached to the trusses, giving the cathedral a tent-like appearance. The lantern tower rises into the sky 290 foot high, and at its peak is a crown of pinnacles, perhaps resembling a crown of thorns. The weight of this tower is over 2,000 tons. The tower itself has 16 windows, each 65 foot by 12 foot. As we approach the top of the steps, we take in the 80-foot facade of the bell tower, built from creamy white Portland stone, holding the 4 bells of the evangelists. The 4 bells are dedicated to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. These bells are electrically operated and are designed to ring freely or to be individually tolled. Below the bells, carved on the Portland stone, are a series of crosses and crowns representing the crucifixion. Let us look at the sliding door of cold cast iron by the artist William Mitchell, and they depict the winged emblems of the 4 evangelists. See if you can recognize the following: the man of St. Matthew, the lion of St. Mark, the ox of St. Luke, and the eagle of St. John. Let us enter the cathedral, and our eyes are immediately drawn in front of us to the circular nave. Its purpose is for the 2,300 members of the congregation to see and be part of the celebration of the Mass. The altar itself comes from 19 tons of pure white marble from Macedonia. On the altar is a cross with arms outstretched by the sculptor Dame Elizabeth Frink, with candlesticks made by Professor Robert Gooden. Behind the altar is the cathedral, and behind the cathedral is the choir. To the right of the altar is the ambo, where the bookrest is formed by 2 sea eagles, or are they liverbirds? Sculptured by local artist Sean Rice, relating to Liverpool's maritime setting, past and present. Hanging over the altar is a tubular-framed baldacchino, 50 foot in diameter. It looks like Christ's crown of thorns, protecting the sanctuary. Let's look at the magnificent tower of glass that rises high above the sanctuary. There are 16 windows, each 65 foot by 12 feet of stained glass. John Piper and Patrick Retchins were the designers of this masterpiece. The traditional method of stained glass windows is the bonding of glass and lead, but the stained glass windows of the Metropolitan Cathedral are not done in this way. John and Patrick thought that they would have 3 colours, a trinity of blue, yellow and red. The concrete ribs that we can see would be used as reference lines in a continuous flow of colour. However, there were complications. Bonding glass to glass is not easy. An epoxy resin was invented, which had a strand of fibre between each resin dressing. A full-scale cartoon of each window was worked up, i.e., paint on paper. The ribs were painted in as black lines. John and Patrick would check each cartoon for total accuracy, and then the glass structure was precast with a tracery of thin concrete ribs, a technique that was invented especially for the job. Each structure had to be structurally sound to withstand hurricane winds. Once made, they were stored and then crane lifted into place. The architectural masterpiece of this cathedral is when you walk around the inside. Keep on looking up, but only whenever it is safe to do so, and you will see the colours changing from the different shades of blue, yellow, red, orange and green. You will also see 3 areas of white light. These brilliant white lights represent the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. We will now walk around the inside circumference of the cathedral. There are 10 chapels around the circumference, some very small, but each has a message. And one of these messages is reconciliation. We will move in a clockwise direction. Our first chapel is the Chapel of Reconciliation. Here there is a sculpture by Stephen Foster that shows Christ with his arms outstretched. Can you see his right hand stretching towards a model of the Roman Catholic Metropolitan Cathedral, and to his left hand to the Anglican Cathedral? We had our own sectarian difficulties here in Liverpool. However, our clergy of both denominations, and in particular Archbishop Warlock and Bishop Shepherd, and this spirit was cemented by Pope John Paul's visit in 1982. Our next chapel is dedicated to children. The inscriptions are in Chinese and English. The gift of the sculpture has been donated by our Chinese community. A candle is lit permanently for the souls of the infants who have no graves. The next chapel is the Chapel of St. Joseph. The chapel is bordered with pine wood, and the sculptor Stephen Foster has carved several scenes from the life of St. Joseph: the birth of Jesus, the flight of the Holy Family into Egypt, Joseph training Jesus to be a carpenter, and Joseph portrayed on his deathbed supported by Mary and Jesus. This simple but serene Lady Chapel is next dedicated to Mary, with sculptures by Robert Brumby of the Madonna and Child. By the west apse is a statue of Abraham, father of all Jews and Arabs, a sculpture by the local artist Sean Rice, who also created the ambo and the Stations of the Cross. We come now to the Blessed Sacrament Chapel, the largest of all the chapels. It is a chapel that I personally feel alive in. The colours of the yellows and blues are so positive and calming, and here one can reflect and meditate. It has 2 stained glass windows on either side that shine in bright light directly onto the altar. The tabernacle is recessed in the rear wall, overseen by an abstract reredos. The cosy chapel of St. Columba is next. It's enclosed but intimate, and reflects the history of the early church in the north of the British Isles. The wall panels are designed by Sister Anthony Wilson and made by Mrs. Pat Bolton. Our next chapel is the Chapel of Unity, and has a mosaic by George Meyer Martin depicting Mary and the Apostles caught up in the revelation by the Holy Spirit. The Chapel of Remembrance is next, with an embroidered panel by Sister Anthony Wilson. It was inspired by the poem The Dream of Gerontius by St. Cardinal John Newman. It depicts the journey of a pious man's soul from his deathbed to his judgment before God and settling into purgatory. Edward Elgar wrote an oratorio about the dream of Gerontius, and his work is considered as one of its finest. Elgar stayed in Liverpool and Huskisson Street many times, and is said to have written many or part of his works there, including Pomp and Circumstance. The Chapel of the Holy Oils is next, with an embroidered panel by Robin McGee depicting the uses of oils in the various sacraments and rites of the Church. The Ways of the Cross. This is the work of again our local artist Sean Rice, and they are cast in manganese bronze. Let's look at the wall hangings. When the cathedral was first opened, there were little, if any, wall hangings. However, these wall hangings, designed by Sister Anthony Wilson and made in the Cathedral Art Studio, are not only superb and decorative, but tell us stories of their own. Let's pick out 3. Our Lady of Liverpool, Mary, Protector of Liverpool, and here she opens her cloak so that she can protect the people of Liverpool, the port of Liverpool represented by the ships, and you may also see the Liverpool skyline on either side. St. Nicholas, patron of the city of Liverpool and all seafarers. St. Nicholas is holding the cathedral in his left hand. His right hand is blessing the ships in the port of Liverpool. He is standing on bars of gold because he is a generous man. And of course we know St. Nicholas as Father Christmas, and the children represent his and our love of children. Pentecost. The Holy Spirit is seen as descending at Pentecost and giving its blessing to Pope John Paul II on his visit to Liverpool in 1982. Beside Pope John Paul is the Archbishop, Cardinal Hume and David Shepherd, and others at this wonderful location. The organ is made by J.W. Walker. It has 4 manuals, 88 speaking stops, and 4,565 pipes. It is a traditional English choir. They sing 5 choral services a week. There is a director of music, an assistant director, a principal organist, and an organ scholar. We're going to go down to the crypt, and the Luytens Crypt is magnificent, designed and built to hold the weight of Luytens Cathedral. It is divided into 4 areas and laid out in an extraordinary bricked-out style with granite from quarries from Penryn in Cornwall. Here we see the main hall. On our left-hand side is the Chapel of Relics, separated by a rolling stone gate. It rolls open and shuts as an allusion to sealing the tomb of Christ after his crucifixion and before his resurrection. There are 2 other chapels where many of the parochial services are held on a weekday and on a Sunday. Other parts of the crypt are given over to commercial activities such as concerts. The Roman Catholic Cathedral was completed in 1967 and consecrated in that year on Whit Sunday. The final cost came in at £4 million. I have visited this cathedral many times, and to some, the architecture, design, layout, we would refer to as the spread Marmite. What does that mean? It means that you either like it or you do not. People love to contrast the differences between our 2 cathedrals, and that's only fair. My own view is that I love both cathedrals precisely because they are so different. As the French would say, vive la différence. I enjoy the wonderful and magnificent stained glass tower, the small and intimate chapels that each tell a story. A huge thank you must go to the volunteers and clergy of the cathedral. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram, or on my website johnstours.co.uk.